We won't be there the whole time, but today we're talking about the worldview of naturalism or atheism. Atheism would mean no God. This is a worldview that lives as if there is no God and believes that everything in this world can be explained by natural means. It's very similar. It's kind of the outgrowth of deism. Deism, remember, believed that there was a God that made everything, but then kind of closed off the system and like a watch wound it up and let it go. And that nothing happens apart from kind of natural causes. Well, naturalism is just taking God out of that factor and saying everything that happens, we kind of know how it happens. It's by some scientific process, and it just goes on and in this kind of closed system as well. We're now getting into a worldview that you would probably encounter here in Ithaca, right? There are many here who would just be naturalistic atheists, especially those of the scientific community. Probably we had a neighbor up the hill here, Mr. Sagan, has written a lot of works that the naturalists embrace, and he tried to create a kind of transcendence and wonder at the cosmos, right? Almost a worship of the stars and everything, because he had no God to give credit to. And we'll actually talk about Carl Sagan later on, whom I believe was more of a pantheist when you read his writings. But sometimes pantheism goes along with atheism. It just depends on which God you put on the throne. See, the trouble is we all worship something. And atheism actually worships something as well. Naturalism, it worships the natural world. That's God. And we'll see that as we move down through our questions about how they answer worldview questions. So, like all the other weeks, we're going to go through these questions and look at what Scripture says about them, and even talk about some of the internal inconsistencies that might give you some talking points to help kind of prepare the ground to then make sure you give them the gospel. What everybody needs is the gospel. That is the power of God unto salvation for everyone, okay? But sometimes you lay some groundwork beforehand, like Paul did in Acts 17, where you find something in your culture that you can agree with, a truth that the fallen world has grasped. You bring that out through quoting their poets, through knowing what their thinkers think, and then you make a bridge to the gospel and you make sure you tell them about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You don't hold off on that because it sounds kind of silly. You give it to them. And then the three results are, some will mock, some will say, I'll hear you a little more on this, but I'm not going to believe yet, and some will believe. That's the three results of any time you share the gospel with anyone. So just because someone mocks doesn't mean you did the gospel in an incorrect way, in fact. So let's answer the question of how the naturalist would think about his world around him. So how do we know anything? And remember, this is called epistemology. How do we know anything in this world? Well, we know by experience and nature. And if you were paying attention, or if you have a whole notebook of all these notes from these lessons, which I'm sure you all do, and you're holding and you're hoping to even sell because it's so wonderful, but don't, because you might get copyright infringement, not from me, but from the other guys I'm borrowing from. But how we know anything, we know by experience and nature. We may observe the world around us and make rational conclusions. That's basically the same idea of deism. But what it says is that's how we know. We know through experience. So we know through testing something over and over and over. That's why in our day and age, science is king. If you ask anyone what's truth, if they don't give you like the kind of wishy-washy experiential in the other way, emotional experiential truth, like my truth. Well, truth is whatever I feel at the moment. If you pin someone down and say, no, what's really true? What conforms to reality? Reality for this world is what science has said. Okay, that's reality. Now, unfortunately, science says different stuff at different times, sometimes even contradictory. I found during the pandemic, at the very beginning of it, I was watching Governor Cuomo's daily briefs, that he won an Emmy for because they were so great. Well, I watch them every day because I'm wanting to know when we can open church back up and what rules are, and I'm trying to be very careful with all of it. And one of the things he started saying over and over was, the facts change, the facts change. And I just wanted to kind of say, no, I would say it at my computer screen all the time. No, facts don't change, okay? Your observations of the facts change. A fact is fact. Truth is truth, okay? So our observations are changing all the time, and maybe even what we thought was true isn't, but that doesn't mean the facts are changing. There is objective reality out there. How do we know what objective reality is? Well, we know through this scientific process of testing and seeing it's going to happen every time. Okay? So that's how we know, by experience and nature. So this worldview rules out that there is a God. There is no God who reveals anything to us. And you know why that's convenient and why you'd want to believe that? Because what happens if there is a God? What happens if God really does exist? Then I have to answer to him. So it's convenient to not believe in a God because it's really kind of an ostrich sticking his head in the sand. I don't want to have to think about the implications of that. And Romans 1 verse 19 catches this perfectly. Because it says this, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So I know we've used this. It applies almost every week to worldview. It's wonderful. But it is. God is revealed in his creation. But here's what man does. Here's what the naturalist does. Verse 21. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Okay. So man exchanges the truth of God for a lie. He doesn't want to believe that God exists because he knows he'll have to answer to him. We read this morning Psalm 14:1. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Right? So let me encourage you, when you make friends with people who live a kind of atheistic, rationalistic, humanistic, naturalistic way that only believes in matter and flesh and blood and what's here right in front of me and only bow to the God of science, don't let that intimidate you. Okay? Understand they are being foolish. Our God in heaven calls them a fool. They might have all the PhDs in the world, and they might know way more about science than you or I know. They may know way more about God's wonderful creation than we know. But the Bible here says they can take that truth that they know intricately, and they can exchange a lie for it. That is what's in the heart of mankind. So they say there is no God who reveals anything to us. Here's something else important. I don't know if it comes under this question, but I had to get it in here. There is no such thing as mind and soul, okay? Because those are immaterial. So there's no such thing as mind and soul. They reject what's called dualism. Dualism believes that you and I are more than just one thing. We're not just matter. We're matter plus consciousness. And consciousness is something that we can't weigh. We can't put it in a test tube. We can measure consciousness so it's there, but the naturalist explanation of mind and thought and the internal dialogue that goes on in me, That's just chemical processes going on in your head. That's just a bunch of chemicals firing brain synapses and nerves, and what you're thinking is a completely physical process. Now, there is physical process involved in my thinking, right? I can't think. My thinking can be impaired by something physical going on in my life, right? You know, if I've got a bad knee, that can affect my preaching. You're not noticing right now, but I've got a knee issue going on right now. You know, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying. But you know, I mean, you can, you got something hurt. You got something going on in your physical head that can impair your mental processes. We are a unified body, soul, spirit. But there's more to us than just the physical. Well, the naturalists, most of them will deny this and say that thing that you call consciousness, you know, it's nothing. It's just your brain's firing and chemicals moving through your body. Memories, right? Memories, they're real, but they're not real. I can't test them. I can't do anything with them. I can't measure them. I can measure how many times I have them, but I don't see them on a microscope. I see them in a mind's eye, but we can't map out a mind's eye, can we? Well, that's why they boil everything down to just this natural, chemical, biological processes. Okay? So here's what dualism believes. Dualism believes that humans are material and immaterial. Okay? That's what you and I would believe. And then, from there you can go even further. You can say we're made up of many things: mind, body, soul, spirit. You know, in 1 Thessalonians 5, Paul said, "May the Lord present you body, soul, spirit complete before Christ." In Deuteronomy it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your..." In the Hebrew, you could translate it, your muchness. Everything about you, love the Lord with. Okay? So there's more than what meets the eye, more to us than just the physical world. So now the question, why are we here? Okay. Well, their belief is the universe exploded into existence billions of years ago, and life emerged out of chemical reactions. Okay. Now, there's various ways of dealing with the idea, the problem, and this is the biggest problem in their worldview, is how did the universe explode? What does nothing ever make? Nothing. You never get anything out of nothing, okay? And that's a law they believe in. But somehow we had this time when something came out of nothing. And then it came on and on from there. And do you know that actually the first person who proposed the Big Bang Theory was actually a Christian theist? They believed in a God. They believed that the Big Bang came from God because they're at least consistent. They understand there's no thing that can come from nothing. Okay? But they believe somehow something came out of nothing billions of years ago. And from that point on, you can find a cause and effect to everything. So the universe explodes, gases are real dense. There's always a lot of denseness in all this. Get it? They're really dense. You know? So there's a lot of denseness in all this. And then gases, and then planets, and then from planets, comes life eventually. And as far as we know, we're the only life, but we're sure it happened someplace else because it's happened here. So the naturalist is very open to the idea of life on other planets because it happened here, given enough time. Okay? And everything you see comes from some sort of closed system of cause and effect. Now, I've used this idea of closed system a lot of times in these talks so far, so let me tell you what I mean by closed system. It means that there's nothing we can do to change what will happen. Everything is a biological process. Okay? So, if you light wood on fire, if it's just a piece of wood and you light it on fire, you know what it's going to do. It's going to ignite, it's going to light on fire, and there's scientific principles for why that happens. The wood never has some will of its own and tries to do something else. Now, sometimes we feel like things do that, but there's always some natural explanation, right? So maybe you light wood and steam starts coming out. Well, what's the explanation for that? There's water in it, okay? And when we light water and ignite it enough, you can't light it on fire, but when we heat up water enough, steam comes out. So there's a closed system, which means nothing else is going to happen. And that goes all the way to humanity. Okay? You and I are just chemical processes. And the only reason we do anything is because of chemicals moving about in our bodies. The only reason I'm standing here today preaching, according to a naturalistic explanation, would be that I have bought into something that humanity has bought into for a long time. We can't agree on how long. But the idea that there's a God and that we ought to worship him. But why do I buy into that? Well, there's cause and effect. I buy into it because my parents raised me in that concept, and I came to agree with it when I was 8 years old. And so because I bought into it, my parents did, and on and on. But if you trace it all the way back to my prime ancestors, they started believing in a God first because they saw people die and they had to come up with what happened after that. And on top of that, they had to come up with, because so many complex chemicals are firing in our brains as opposed to like my chickens that you look at them, they're just like, so many complex chemicals are firing. We had to come up with systems of protection. So we had to believe in a higher being because that, in an evolutionary terms, would help preserve us to live. Because if there's any law in the world, it's that everything wants to live and propagate itself. Okay? So primal humans way back thousands of years ago came up with this concept of God that gave them fear so that they would live in a proper way and avoid dying. And because we avoid dying, so we want to propagate because evolutionary ideas are king. That's why I'm preaching this morning. Okay? There's a closed system. It's not my free will. I have no choice to do it. So that's interesting. Why then do the atheists hate that I'm doing this? Why do they care? It's just an evolutionary process. Why not just be chill and go along with it? But they don't. So we'll talk about that a little more later. But everything is just a closed system. Do you know you and I don't really make choices? We're chemical reactions. And you know this sometimes, right? When I was first courting Suzanne and I would see her across the kitchen at Camp Bayuka, there were a lot of chemicals firing in my body, right? The butterflies in my stomach and my head, the endorphins are running, and then her chemicals would move her to wink her eye at me, and boy, did that make a lot more chemicals start firing in my brain, It's not that we made choices to be in love with each other, and it's all chemicals, baby. And you can even bottle these little things up. You can bottle up, what are they called? Those chemicals that make you fall in love, and that makes for good science fiction movies, right? So we're in this closed system. So what is true is the next question. And truth, here's the one good thing I find about naturalism. Truth can be objectively known through rational thought and scientific testing. So what they want to say is there is truth, whether or not you believe it. Sometimes atheists are really arrogant people because they don't tolerate the emotional wishy-washiness of our culture. And I'm on their side, frankly, at times. What's interesting, there's a group, and maybe we can talk about these later on in this talk, but a group called the New Atheists that formed around 2006. Guys like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. And these guys, when it comes to this new, well, not Christopher Hitchens, he's dead, but guys like Richard Dawkins, when it comes to this new idea of being able to identify what I am, not according to my biological sex, but how I feel, that is deplorable to them because it's not following science. Okay? So they don't think you get to just identify and decide you're whatever you want. because they don't believe there's anything but your body. There's not even a mind. There's only chemicals misfiring if you think that you are a man when you were born biologically a woman. So they believe contrary to the way kind of culture is swinging us now. So it's just interesting to watch people who are very opposed to Christianity, yet they care about the truth. It's a very, very interesting conundrum for them to be in. So what is good and evil? Well, good and evil is what human experience shows us. Human experience determines whether an action is good or evil, and it's always according to the situation. So we have situation ethics, right? Now, normally it would be wrong to kill somebody, correct? But if you don't want a child that's in your body, you can kill that child, and that's okay. Stealing normally is wrong, but if you are starving and need bread, then stealing is fine. Let me read a statement from the second Humanist Manifesto, published in 1970, I don't have it here, 73 or something like that. Here's what the Humanist Manifesto said. And the Humanist Manifesto is a group of people that got together and realized that as naturalist scientists, they had no reason to have any morality. If there is no God, why don't I just shoot you and take what I want? Well, they had to come up with a reason to make people good. So they come up with this Humanist Manifesto, first in 1933, then they revised it. Very interesting. They do it in 33, and they're very optimistic about the great places that science will take us in 1933. Well, you know what happened after 1933? Some great world powers got together, and one really great world power went and conquered a lot of the world by the name of Germany and Hitler under the Nazis. So after 1933, those humanists were kind of embarrassed, like, yeah, maybe the human heart, if science is just allowed to do whatever it wants, maybe the human heart's not going to choose to do what's right. So they had to work out some ethics, some morality. So here's what they came up with in the 70s after World War II. We affirm that moral values derive their source from human experience. Ethics is autonomous, meaning self-determined laws, autonomous and situational, needing no theological or ideological sanction. Okay? So that means what I say is right and wrong has nothing to do with any higher power, okay? Ethics stems from human need and interest. To deny this distorts the whole basis of life. Okay? So you see, that is their source of good and evil, whatever humans need at the moment. Okay? Who's to say Hitler didn't need to conquer all those nations and exterminate the world of Jewish people? Well, a lot of suffering went on, so that was bad, so that's morally wrong. And in the end, all of us came together against Hitler, so it's bad. You know, that's basically all they have to say. They really have nothing to prove what is good and evil. So, that being said, why did events in history happen? And I've already brought this up. All events have a cause within the universe's closed system. Your free will is an illusion. So really, Hitler was just being pumped on chemicals, and our reaction to him was a chemical reaction. We're all a bunch of brain mush chemicals fighting one another. You know, that's all that's going on. There's nothing guiding this process. It's a closed system, right? In fact, there was an author, Isaac Asimov. I really like him. He's a science fiction author, but he was a huge atheist, very proud atheist, and he wrote a series, Foundation it's called, a series of books, and he was in this series, there's a guy named Harry Seldon, and Harry Seldon is a mathematician, and this culture is so scientifically advanced, what this mathematician is able to do is understand the complexities of human nature, all the chemical mushes, you know, that are firing, and how humans are going to act. He, through probability and mathematics, can predict the future. They have something called psychohistory. So they predict the future because the age of science now understands the complex reactions of why you and I do what we do. And that's all you would need. If you were God in this system, you'd be able to see all the scientific formula that makes me walk up and shake your hand and say, hello, how you doing? And you respond to me, and why some 50 people might meet in a building on Sunday morning, and why, 500 people are out on the lake on a Sunday morning, and they figured out the scientific complexity of how our minds work, and then they're able to predict how future civilizations will act. So that shows Isaac Asimov is writing from this atheistic perspective, and his idea is that if only we could figure out how human minds work better, and we're trying all the time to map out how the mind works. If we could figure it out, then we would know 100% how someone's going to react. The same way that if I understand that if I take this bottle cap and let go, it's going to fall. There, it happened. Wow. I'm no prophet. I just know the science of gravity. And that's what this guy was. He's a psychohistorian. He's a mathematician. And so it's just a very interesting series. And I would say Isaac Asimov is a poet in a sense of naturalism. And I've read a number of his books. So with that in mind, that kind of looks at why does history happen, and it looks at where are we going in the future as well. Because if we can learn more about humanity and the scientific processes that move us, we can know with precision what will happen. But there's no outside influence of a God on this system. There's no any hierarchy. There's nothing that's going to change any of this. And in fact, if something evolves beyond us humans, who cares? We're not number one. We've just evolved more complexly than anyone else. And that's why all these scientific movies are worried about the robot takeover or artificial intelligence, because it's a very evolutionary worldview. It's the idea of, well, that's just the next step in evolution. And if they come and evolve beyond us, then who are we to hold them back? Okay? All those movies that reject the robot rebellion are actually romantic. And maybe we could look at it. There's a technical word behind that. Romantic means the belief of getting back to nature and humans expressing themselves as best. So all those movies that reject the coming robot rebellion are not naturalistic, atheistic movies. They're romantic movies, not in the term we use romance, but in the philosophical thought that getting back to nature and human beings are the epitome of all the earth. Okay, so those movies use romanticism to fight naturalism. It's very interesting when worldviews collide when you are none of those worldviews. I like watching that. I like watching thoughts collide. So that's where we're going. Does God exist? If so, what is his nature? God does not exist, right? But in a sense, matter is God, because matter has always existed. And this is held as a religious belief. It's presupposed, it's not proven. We don't know that matter always existed, it just did. It's the only thing that is eternal. When you and I die, we just go into the ground. But you and I were made, a lot of the astrophysicists love to say this as if it sounds exciting. You and I are just stardust. Ooh, isn't that nice? We're stardust. Because stars evolved, had a lot of density, blew up, created planets. The planets then evolved gunk that evolved eventually into me. So I'm stardust. And then one day I'll die, and one day this planet will blow up because it's too close to the sun, or because of cow flatulence, whatever the case. And once this planet blows up, it'll then be dispersed into the universe, and more density will come, and more stardust, and more stuff will be created. And that's the closed system of our universe. No outside God doing anything in any of it. Okay. But let's talk a moment about some of the inconsistencies in thought of the naturalist. They believe, like I mentioned earlier, that our concept of God in religion was created by man as a survival technique because of the evolutionary instinct to survive. Okay. But at the same time, you have these new atheists like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris, who say that religion is hurting the world because we're killing people and doing awful things. So they want to help the world know the truth. You are not made by a God. You're made by evolution, chance. Okay? The thing is, R.C. Sproul once said, what did chance ever create? Chance can't create. Chance is a mathematical equation. It's not a creator. It's not an entity. Chance doesn't create anything. So, if the real truth is that you and I are just stardust and we don't really matter, we're just matter, that's all we are, and belief in God is an evolutionary instinct to keep us alive, then why should they try to take the barriers, the blindfolds off of us and expose us to the truth? Because it's been working for years. We as humanity have survived believing in gods and singular God. Why expose us to the raw, sad truth? You know what's going to happen? We're just going to kill ourselves. And that's what does happen when you see an outgrowth of this called nihilism. It's a bunch of people that see no purpose in living. So, the new atheist who wants to say, I don't believe in God, I have no proof, let me give you the truth. The cold hard truth is that you weren't created with any sort of purpose. Why would you tell a world that if that has been what has kept us alive evolutionarily speaking? See what I'm saying? There's an inconsistency there. Let us believe the lie. As Karl Marx says, religion is the opiate of the masses. Let us smoke our opium. Leave us alone. We'll actually live. So they're inconsistent in their ideas anyway. So let's talk about how to build a bridge with the atheist. And whatever I present this building a bridge, what this always presupposes is that you're building relationships with people not like you. Okay? That you are willing to go out and build relationships with people who vote differently from you, who look differently, who make different decisions on what to do on Sunday, who dress differently. We've got to be out there, right? What was Jesus' first words to the disciples in the Great Commission? Go. Go. So we're out there rubbing shoulders with these people. Here's what I would do. First, talk to them about their love of objective truth. Celebrate that with them. Okay? If someone is a hard scientific atheist, say, I appreciate that you believe reality can be known, that it's not just something you and I make up. That this world is full of this nonsense of making things up. You understand there's real truth out there. I appreciate that. Okay? And then confront them with the emptiness of their position, because it leads to the despair of nihilism. And it shows they have no free will. If the universe is a closed system and you and I are only operating based on brain chemicals firing, isn't that sad and empty? Don't you want to be free and make some decisions? And I'm not talking about the free will debate within salvation. I'm talking about whether humans do things apart from scientific processes that go on. I know they do, because evolutionarily speaking, I should not eat the amount of meat that I like to eat, right? But I eat it anyway. It's probably not the best for me. It's not preserving me, but I'm going to eat it anyway. Is that some leftover instinct in my ancestors? Were they always fleeing from saber-toothed tigers and needed to grab meat real fast to get away? Well, I don't flee from saber-toothed tigers. You'd think my generation could figure it out and that I don't need that much meat. And I have a refrigerator. I don't need to smoke meat all the time, but I love it smoked, even though that's just a preservation method. I like it cold too. Cold pizza, it's all good, right? But confront them with the emptiness of their position. If this is true, you either need to live in despairing or turn to God. That's your two options if you take all their beliefs to the end. And then here's something I've just seen in many people. The complexity of creation has captured the heart of many atheists. Start with Genesis, but always move to Christ in revelation, or Christ in resurrection. Remember, do not leave out the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You haven't shared the gospel. But start with Genesis. Really, the bottom line to every worldview is they've got to have Genesis in place. It was God's first book he revealed. Let's use it. Let's talk about a few of their poets rather briefly. This is more guys you can kind of watch out for, look out. There's the group of new atheists I mentioned. They formed around 2006. There was an article about them, but guys like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, these are guys who are willing to go out there in the world and say religion is bad for the world. It used to, see, the old atheists said, yeah, let Christians do their thing. They build some hospitals. They're a polling place. They hold Red Cross blood drives. That's what old atheists did. They just let us live and let live. New atheists have been coming out stronger saying Christianity hurts the world. So we've got to, take off these blindfolds. I would say Bertrand Russell, he is a philosopher, very naturalistic, closed to this world, very influential in this world's philosophy. Isaac Asimov, the author that I just mentioned, in fact, he signed that second Humanist Manifesto that I read you a portion of about where good and evil come from. Another author that signed it, you may have heard this guy before. See, I'm a literature teacher, so I like names like that. But Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, he signed that Humanist Manifesto as well. And there's a lot of entertainers nowadays. Have you ever seen that Penn and Teller guy, Penn the magician? He's a strong atheist. But something cool he has said? He said, I respect Christians because if I believed that I had the only life-changing thing in the way to be saved, he's like, I'd tell everyone about it. He's like, I'm so glad you care about me. I just think you're nuts. That's his view of us. So I really like that. And I hope the Lord will change him someday. Good books for atheists who are of this ilk. C.S. Lewis is an excellent author for the naturalist atheist because C.S. Lewis kind of dealt with all this stuff in his head. Because you know what he went through? World War I. And going through World War I messed up a whole generation of guys who thought that scientific progress without God was going to get us to great places. C.S. Lewis saw how bankrupt it was and writes article and book over book on this kind of thing. A good book by him, Miracles. That's a great one for your atheist friend. And he writes small books too. That's not the nice thing about him. He doesn't go on and on, unlike this sermon, right? So let's just bow and thank the Lord for our time today. Our Heavenly Father, I thank you for being able to look at this worldview that's different from our own. Lord, may we bring them the hope of the gospel, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. May they just see the beauty and the transcendence of truth, Lord. They have a care for truth, but they just don't know the truth yet. So, Lord, use us to reach them for your glory. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.